From potentially parting ways with the WWE to make a historical return, to Joe Rogan blaming the Hollywood Bowl for sucking her in and ending her career, here's everything you need to know about Ronda Rousey's return to the UFC. For starters, she's being called on to revive the featherweight division. The last time fight fans saw Ronda inside the octagon was back at UFC 207 when she lost the bantamweight title to the former doubleweight champion, Amanda Nunes. Rousey was known as the baddest woman on the planet back then, and despite her loss, she still had a strong rep, with tales of her insane abilities spreading all over the world. But out of nowhere, Rowdy announced her retirement at just 31 years of age and left the game for good, debuting in Hollywood and later in the WWE. It's pretty obvious that she's done with MMA, but recently there have been some rumors floating around about how she might just be considering a return to the promotion. Of course, at the end of the day, these are just rumors and I wouldn't get too excited about it. And who knows? Ronda could pop up on social media any day now and announce that her comeback's nothing but a rumor. But here's the interesting bit. She's actually being called back by multiple MMA personalities to return to the UFC and light up the dying featherweight division. If you ask me, I think that makes very little sense because the prize is clearly the bantamweight division. After Amanda's retirement, both titles are up for grabs, and while the bantamweight division has a clear title contender in view, but the lower weight class is a different story since there aren't a lot of prospects. But would Ronda leave such a beefy job at the WWE to come back to fighting? Henry Cejudo's coach, Eric Albarcin, definitely thinks so. To understand what Eric means, you have to really look at the bigger picture here. There's just so much up for grabs ever since Amanda announced her retirement. Or look at it this way, since Pina is the #1 contender for the bantamweight title, if she ends up winning it, she could easily move to the featherweight division and try her luck at becoming a UFC dual-weight champion. It's really that easy. And whoever does it will not live on as one of the all-time MMA greats, but also leave behind an impressive legacy. Still, what does all this have to do with Ronda? Well, believe it or not, Eric thinks she's the only fighter out there who's ambitious and competitive enough to want to take over 2 divisions. And what's even more interesting is, Albarcin believes Ronda should start with the featherweight division first, spice things up, possibly win the title, and take on the former champ, Juliana Pena, in a high-voltage thriller for the bantamweight title. Now that's something fight fans would love to see happen. And when you think about it, it'll do wonders for the UFC as well. Q's, despite her long absence, Rousey is still one of the biggest names in women's MMA history. It'll almost be like a revival for the women's division, which is much needed at this point because the GOATs just departed. But despite the tempting opportunity, I don't think Ronda would be too interested in giving up her career in entertainment, considering it probably pays way more than MMA. But does the former bantamweight champion even want to come back? I mean, all these rumors, and not once has anyone talked about what Ronda wants. Plus, there's absolutely no way that Rowdy's the same dominant fighter she used to be, since age has probably caught up to her by now. Also, she even made an appearance on the Kurt Angle show in 2022 and talked about how there's only one fighter in the world who'd make her want to ditch the WWE and return to the octagon again. Any guesses who that might be? It's none other than Gina Carano. I get why she'd want to fight her, because even though Rousey is the more successful fighter, Gina has found a lot of success in the entertainment industry. And just the idea of 2 high-profile women fighting each other inside the octagon would be enough to get any fan talking. But at the same time, this isn't exactly new, since Rousey has said this multiple times. When she first announced her retirement, MMA fans were certain she'd make a comeback in no time, since there's no way the former champion could stay away from fighting. But to shut down all the rumors, she made it super clear that only Carano could get her to come out of retirement, no one else. And since Gina hasn't been in the MMA scene for quite some time now, rumors of Ronda's comeback are perhaps just rumors after all. John Anik, on the other hand, thinks the Arm Collector is the UFC's best bet at making things interesting. In fact, ever since Amanda's departure, John thinks Rousey is the only worthy contender out there. Look, I get what they're both trying to say here, but it's a little odd how out of everyone currently on the roster, it's only the former champ who's most worthy of a title shot. And speaking of a title shot, I'm glad Anik sort of caught on to what he was saying, cause he realized just how unfair it'd be if Ronda decided to come back, and the UFC offered her a title shot out of nowhere. It's similar to McGregor's and Cejudo's case. There's been so much going around about how it'll be extremely unfair if the Irishman is given a title shot for his return to the promotion, and that's exactly how it's been with Henry as well. But the only difference is, Triple C actually managed to convince fans in the UFC that he should be given a title shot on his return, since he vacated the belt when he announced his retirement. And of course, this isn't concrete or something. The UFC could put Ronda up against another fighter to see if she still has what it takes to win a title. But if one thing's for sure, I do agree with these guys when they say the arm collector's the only one capable enough of reviving the weight class and giving the women's division something to cheer about. Oh, but is everyone forgetting how she's signed with the WWE long-term? She's actually managed to become a fan favorite. And apart from all that, she's even set to do some shows in Hollywood movies. It's sort of like what McGregor was doing a year back while shooting the Roadhouse remake. There's absolutely no way she can do all that and manage fighting. And I don't mean to throw any shade considering what I'm about to say next, but the WWE isn't the same as MMA. Sure, it requires a lot of athleticism and determination, but at the end of the day, it's entertainment. At the UFC, it's much different since your opponent is out to get you, and would probably be okay with going unconscious or breaking bones before giving in. Whether Ronda could keep up with all that, while training full-time for an MMA bout, is very difficult, since she can't just exit all of her contracts now. So, as much as I want to see her star in a historic comeback fight with a title on the line, I don't think it's possible. And if you ask me, I personally believe the former women's bantamweight champion will squash the rumors herself. But of course, it's something that the UFC and Dana White would always be open to, because whether you like it or not, she will always be the biggest star of the women's division. And speaking of all her commitments, UFC commentator Joe Rogan thinks that's exactly what got her to cut her career short in the first place. In the words of the man himself, Joe thinks Ronda got sucked in the Hollywood Bowl, causing her to fall out of love with the sport. I mean, she had a pretty established record of 12 wins and just 2 losses, and for her to suddenly hang up the gloves really bothered the commentator, because in reality, it was just another loss for the UFC, another high-profile fighter being trapped by Hollywood in the hopes to get fame and a boatload of cash. But yeah, that's what Joe thinks. And at the end of the day, you can't really argue what fighters want to do since they probably have their own ambitions as well. And whether Rousey's love for MMA can outweigh her desire for fame is still a huge question. So, from Joe Rogan slamming Ronda for ditching the UFC and joining Hollywood, to the former champ being called on to revive the women's division, that's everything about the arm collector's rumored return to the UFC.